I'm in conversation with Lord Bilimoria, who is deeply connected to education. He was Vice Chancellor of the University of Birmingham, and he's a crossbench peer, founder of Cobra. And he spoke so eloquently in the House of Lords debate, which was on the contribution of the private schools and the impact VAT would have on them. Thank you very much, Lord Bilimoria, for making time. I know you have you're hard pressed with time today. Is the point that you made about the budget of the state schools and what minuscule amount, even if this 1.3 to 1.5 billion that the government says they will be able to raise putting VAT, which is not true, which is most unlikely. Still, if we go on with that logic, it will not stack up. Please, can you make that argument for us here and for all the people who are listening?
Yes, thank you, Loveena. I have been a university chancellor twice. First as Chancellor of the University of West London for 5 years, and thereafter Chancellor of the University of Birmingham for 10 years until July this year. And I've also been very involved with international students. I'm the co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on International Students and the president of the UK Council of International Student Affairs. As a former international student myself, I feel very strongly that the United Kingdom has the best education in the world when it comes to universities, along with the United States of America, and that's a fact. Also, when it comes to our schools, our private schools are the best in the world. We have the most phenomenal schools, outstanding schools, world-famous schools, but they only make up 7% of the children of this country. 7% of the children go to our private schools, 93% go to the state schools. And the difference between the two is huge. So these 7% of children that go to the private schools are, through the taxation, paying for their place for the state school, which they're not taking up. So in a way, they're subsidizing the other 93% by not using up their place. So that's a fact for a start. On top of that, they pay fees, which are, on average, forget boarding. If you exclude the boarding fees, the average private school fee is £16,000 a year. The average amount spent by the government on a state school child is £8,000. So literally double the amount is being spent per child when they go to a private school. Now, if you can imagine, if we spent double the amount on state schools, how much better we could pay our teachers, how much better the facilities would be, how much better our state school education would be. And the budget for state schools is £60 billion. And here we have a government saying, well, private schools have been exempt for VAT, they've been exempt for business rates. We will now remove those exemptions. They'll have to pay business rates and they will have to pay VAT at 20%. So that puts up the fees. Yes, not by 20% because the private schools will be able to reclaim some input VAT, but at least by 15%. People have this wrong impression that the children who go to private schools are all children of very wealthy individuals. Of course, some of them are. But the vast majority are parents who really skimp, save, strive, make sacrifices to be able to pay the fees to send their children to go to a private school. And this is particularly the case when it comes to children with special needs. The private school sector is essential when it comes to special needs. I know that for two of my children, one of them highly dyslexic, dyspraxic, attention deficit disorder. If he had not gone to two private schools that gave him that special education for his special needs, he would not have got 3 A stars at A-level and a first-class degree from the London School of Economics. That is the power and the strength of that special education that's needed for the special needs. Now, if you're going to make that more expensive, if you're going to make that unaffordable, look at the harm that that's going to do. What about our armed forces, the children who need to go to boarding school? If you put up those fees, it's going to make it more difficult for them. So many, many children may not be able to go to private schools if you put the fees up by 15, in effect, a net 15%. And what will happen then? Those children will go to the state schools, which puts more of a burden on the state schools, who, as it is, many of them don't have the space. And therefore, they will then need to spend that money on those children. So this calculation of getting a net 1.3 to 1.5 billion by putting up 20% VAT on private school fees is going to backfire because it will not end up being the 1.5 billion. because there will be more of a cost on the state school sector. Many calculations have shown that, in fact, it might be a net cost to the exchequer by trying to raise this 1.5 billion. But the most important point is, what is 1.5 billion supposedly to get 6,500 more teachers? Well, 1.5 billion, when you're spending 60 billion, it's a drop in the ocean. What we need to do is to prioritize school education. It has not been a priority for governments in the past, certainly not for the last 14 years. And we need to spend more as part of our budget, generally speaking, on state education to reduce this gap of 8,000 to 16,000, not rob Peter to pay Paul, which is going to backfire. And another point is international students. We have 28,000 boarders from around the world at our private schools as we speak. If it's more expensive for those boarders, they have a choice to go to other countries. They don't have to come to the UK. Other countries offer boarding school, for example, the United States of America. So we will lose out on those students. And what about that? We lose out not only on their fees and what they spend over here. They've calculated that even a 15% drop in those international borders will be about £300–400 million lost. But on top of that, those children that come here as international boarders, 90% of them end up going to British universities. So our universities are going to lose out on those excellent students, international students. So the repercussions of this are huge. The government has not thought it through. And this really comes across as class warfare without thinking of the children, of the parents, of the education, and of what is good for our country. And this is not a well thought through plan at all. It is going to backfire.
And all the points brilliantly made, especially private schools save 4.4 billion for the economy and contribute 328,000 jobs. But I'm going to be here a devil's advocate, Lord Bilimoria, and I want to ask you, from what you said, that all children like yours should get the opportunity in the state sector as well. So why, and this is a plan for equal opportunity and leveling up. What would you say to that argument?
Yes, so there are two things. One is government needs to prioritize education. Even universities, they are underfunding universities. The fees have been capped at 9,250 for 7 years. Inflation at that time has eroded that down to £6,000 for universities. And the costs have gone up for them. And we're meant to have the finest universities in the world. So they haven't been prioritizing universities. Similarly, schools. The spending on schools has hardly gone up if you look over the last 2 decades. Nowhere near as much as it should go up. We need to prioritize and spend more on school education. That's the most important thing that needs to be done. Secondly,
where did the money come from?
Well, if you prioritize things, you find the money. And if they say they want to grow the economy, growing the economy should lead to more jobs, which leads to more taxes, which leads to more for the public sector and for public good. Like there's no more public good than the education of our children. It's the most important thing for the future. The next thing is state schools themselves are doing so much good. The number of places at private schools are doing so much themselves. The number of places at private schools now that are subsidized or fully funded through endowments that private schools are raising, the number of partnerships that private schools now have with state schools, where they have exchanges, where they have a number of ways in which they support local state schools, is phenomenal. We need to encourage that much more. It's happening anyway. We need to do more of that. So if you take a combination of the two, of the private sector working more closely with the state sector, the private sector subsidizing and making available places in their schools, and the government prioritizing and spending more on state schools, then we'll have a situation where our school education overall will improve in leaps and bounds.
Now, my second argument that everyone keeps trotting is that, and which has not been spoken very much, are the business rates that the schools might have to pay. The head teachers there, is not run like a business. Some people say it's a tax break given for a while. It should be taken off. It has had its day. What would you say? And it's not a charity, it's run like a business. So what would you say on business rates and charging business rates from a charity that is a private school, or is private school a business?
The reality is that private schools are charities. Any surpluses they make are plowed back in. They're plowed back in to improve the facilities and what they can offer their students, and also to subsidize and provide places for students who cannot afford to pay the fees. So they are run as charities. And business rates, by the way, as former president of the Confederation of British Industry, CBI, we have been fighting for years for the government to reform business rates on the whole. We have one of the most expensive business rates in Europe. We have a system that is ruining the high street. We need to reform business rates drastically, and the last government has not listened. I hope the Labour government will listen, and we need to reform business rates on the whole, let alone applying them to private schools, which should not be happening at all.
Third point on leveling up, equal opportunity for all. I do want you to focus on that, please. And people would come and say, oh, you had 2 children, you could afford to go to, I have a SEND child, I can't even afford to send them, or I haven't been able to get a bursary. What would you say to the leveling up and equal opportunity agenda?
Yes, and this is where it's very important that you obviously would want to raise all standards. And the dream scenario would be as if the state could spend £16,000 per child and provide the same quality of facilities, pay their teachers much better that the private sector can do because the charges are double. That is the dream scenario. But in the meantime, how are we going to benefit by removing that excellence that exists to try and bring things down? You're talking about leveling up, not leveling down. And that's the important point over here. We've got to do whatever we can to improve the state schools, make sure they're better, not ruin the private schools. That is the wrong way to look at it. And here's the most important thing. When it comes to children with special needs, it is very important that we teach every teacher in this country, state school or private school, to be able to spot as early as possible in kindergarten or in primary school that a child needs that special needs. That's the most important thing. And then have the facilities so that those children are given the special care, attention, and education that they need. That needs to be done. And whatever it costs in the state school sector, that should be provided. One should not have to rely on the private school sector at the moment, as we tend to do, for that. And that is an important, and that's again, a question of government prioritizing it. And I know if you provide that special needs education, a dyslexic child, dyspraxic child, attention disorder child, like two of our children were special needs, one severe. He could not even hold a pencil at the age of 9. He could not even read or write at the age of 9. He went to a special prep school, and he went to an excellent senior school. Between the two of them, they ended up helping him to the extent that he got 3 A-stars at A-level and a first-class degree from London School of Economics. That should be available to every child in this country that needs special needs attention.
Yeah, and it can't come from private schools because it's a drop in the ocean, as you said, isn't it?
But that's why I say this is a question of prioritizing. If I were Prime Minister, Secretary of State of Education, I would, or Chancellor of the Exchequer, I would be prioritizing, because education is the most important thing. If we have our children better educated, if I have our special needs addressed, the productivity of this country will go up in leaps and bounds. That's what's going to power this economy ahead. And we've got great capabilities, creativity, and innovation historically. If we don't address our education at school level, we're going to harm the future for our country and for our children.
I'm going to pick up on the word harm, Lord Bilimoria. How do you think this policy can harm the future of this country?
Oh, this is a hugely harmful policy, a policy that is playing to the gallery of a sort of politics of envy, a class warfare, is just the wrong thing to do, where you're putting children into politics, and they're the ones who are going to suffer. The children who are at the moment, those parents who are just about affording their children to go to private school, because that's their aspiration. That's what they want. We're a free country where people can have that choice, make that choice, pay for that choice, work for that choice. We never want to remove those fundamentals of our country. And it's very harmful to level down. We should be leveling up.
Indeed, and this whole perception that's been created that in the name of leveling up, it is going to make education more elite. So we have figured out that it is making education more elite. It is only allowing the rich now to be able to afford it. The numbers are not stacking up. Even if we got 1.3 billion, it is a drop in the ocean of for the 60 billion budget that already exists, which needs to go up. Then why? Why is Labour still able to pursue this and sell it to the people?
Well, they've made this manifesto promise and they feel they've got to stick and commit to their promises. Now, I believe very, very fundamentally that you can make promises, but if you are presented with facts that show that that was not a good decision to make, then you should change your mind. Because if the facts change in terms of given that explanation, then you change your mind. And well, I don't want to call it a flip-flop. I don't want to call it a backtracking. It is a sensible move to listen to the argument and see what is to the benefit of the economy. Because to go down this route, to impose this, and actually what will end up happening is you're not going to raise the 1.5 billion pounds at all. It's probably going to end up costing you more than 1.5 billion pounds. I mean, what a foolish move would that be? And we're pointing that out and saying, don't do that. We're preventing you from doing that. Go about it another way and improve the education of state school children. That's the objective.
Now, I'm going back to the House of Lords debate that happened on the 5th of September, where you spoke so well, and so did so many lords and baronesses, including those of the Labour Party. I remember Lord Hacking saying to have a roundtable consultation, and you gave what you just said, the suggestions. But why did Baroness Smith not hear? Why these new facts and figures not appealing to the Labour Party? They keep harping on the IFS, which is already on assumptions and uncertain terms by their own admission. Why is the Adam Smiths and the EDSKs of the world, the new researchers, not reaching or not making any impact there? What's happening in the corridors of Westminster?
The government should be saying on an issue like this, when it was quite frankly, as you say, cross-party. You had a Labour peer, cross-benchers, and Conservatives, and Liberal. Cross-party saying, please rethink this. Please listen to us. Listen to the argument before you make this decision. And on top of that, to bring it in halfway through an academic year, that's wrong. That is, in fact, inhuman to do something like that. So this is rushing into something when you don't need to rush into it. Listen to all the arguments. And on top of that, if you've got a suggestion from Lord David Pannick, one of the most respected lawyers in this country, and that's a fact, saying this could be breaching human rights and the ECHR, well, the government is then going to have a real problem if it's taken there and it's found to be a breach of human rights, when they will not be able to go ahead at all, and that'll be very embarrassing for them. So my advice for them would be sit down, listen to the argument, listen to what will be good for the country. Don't do this because you feel you have to do it. And I would hope they will listen now.
Brilliant. And I think the legal challenge has already gone ahead, and Education on Taxation, that I represent as a spokesperson, is supporting that. So that's a road already, or an option already been taken. So thank you so very much, Lord Bilimoria. Your last word on what should one do, or what can one do, if you want to answer, to drive this point to the government? I mean, we have gone and given a petition to 10 Downing Street. We have written to Education Secretary. We have done all it takes. What next?
I think, yes, we have to keep making the point. We have to keep making the point about this in the way that you are, in the way that we did in the House of Lords. And we've got to get this message across, because the more the government hears this, hopefully they will listen. And a very small analogy, I remember that Michael Gove wanted to remove the history of art A-level, and it was going to disappear. And I remember we fought for it in a cross-party in the House of Lords. The minister listened and said, okay, you've all made the point. Very well, we will listen, we will go back. And you know what? they found an exam board that actually carried on history of art, which continues to this day. And if we hadn't done that, we would have missed out and we would not have history of art A-level anymore. So it's
I think
very
Kate
important.
Middleton did it. Kate Middleton did history of art, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, I think she did. She did indeed.
I think she
So,
did.
you know, so I'm saying that it is possible. I've seen it. I was part of that debate. My daughter was studying history of art at the time. She said, Dad, my teacher will lose his job. And I believe in that subject. My mother studied history of art, and we fought in Parliament, and the minister listened, and government listened, and they backtracked. So, you know, it is possible.
Lord Bilimoria, you fighting. You'll take the fight further as well. What can
I
you
will
do
keep
more?
fighting.
Please
I will
tell
keep
us.
fighting. Thanks for all that you're doing as well.
Thank you very,
Great, Loveena.
very much.
All
Thank
the
you
best.
so very
All the
much.
best.
Thank you. Delighted to have spoken to Lord Bilimoria, who very kindly shared his personal experience as well and spoke very strongly against VAT for private schools on the 5th of September in the House of Lords. I must remind, he is a cross-bench peer. And even the Labour Party peers actually spoke against the policy, which must be reviewed. It must go through meaningful engagement and consultation process. Everyone is screaming for it. I really hope the government hears. We at Education Not Taxation, ENT, as we call ourselves, are for good education for all children. We want to stand and are standing for every child, because every child matters, but the government must find a better way to fund the state education. Taking from Peter, giving to Paul cannot be and should not be and is not the most wise way forward. We'll keep bringing you these conversation with you. Please continue, follow our handles and leave your comments. Thank you. Take care and God bless.